The Arizona sun blazed mercilessly across Highway 60, turning the asphalt into shimmering waves of heat that distorted the horizon. Jake Harrison wiped the sweat from his brow as he led the Desert Riders Motorcycle Club eastbound, the roar of 5 Harley-Davidson engines cutting through the silent desert expanse. At 45, Jake carried the weathered face of a man who had seen too much during his 2 tours in Afghanistan, but found peace in the open road and the brotherhood of riders who had become his chosen family. Behind him rode Tommy Chen, a mechanic from Phoenix with grease permanently stained under his fingernails and a laugh that could lift anyone's spirits. Beside Tommy was Vincent Cooper, a former construction foreman whose massive frame and gentle nature made him the club's unofficial mediator. The 4th rider, Daniel Wright, was a high school teacher who spent his weekends escaping the confines of classroom walls. Bringing up the rear was Raymond Blake, the youngest at 32, a paramedic who had joined the club 6 months earlier, seeking camaraderie after a difficult divorce. They had left Phoenix early that Saturday morning in July, planning a weekend ride through the Tonto National Forest. The temperature had already climbed past 95 degrees by 10 a.m., and the desert stretched endlessly around them. Red rock formations jutting from sandy plains, scattered saguaro cacti standing like ancient sentinels, and the occasional tumbleweed skittering across the empty highway. "Let's gas up ahead," Jake's voice crackled through the Bluetooth communication system in their helmets. "There's an old station about 15 miles out. We need to hydrate before hitting the mountain roads." The responses came in quick succession, affirmative grunts and nods invisible beneath helmets. They had ridden together for 3 years now, every weekend when schedules allowed, creating rituals that bound them tighter than blood. These rides weren't just about motorcycles. They were about healing, about finding purpose after life had knocked each of them down in different ways. As they approached mile marker 217, a dilapidated gas station emerged from the heat haze. The place looked abandoned, paint peeling from the walls, one pump leaning at an awkward angle, windows covered in years of dust and grime. A faded sign read, "Pete's Fuel Stop," though it clearly hadn't served customers in at least a decade. Jake signaled to pull in anyway. The shade under the rusted awning would provide relief, even if the pumps were dead. The bikes rumbled to a stop, engines cutting off one by one, leaving only the whistle of hot wind through the desert and the tick of cooling metal. Jake removed his helmet, running his hand through salt and pepper hair matted with sweat. The others dismounted, stretching road-stiff muscles and reaching for water bottles. "Man, it's a furnace out here," Tommy said, his Asian features scrunched against the brightness. "Remind me why we do this again?" "Because you love us," Vincent replied, his deep voice rumbling with amusement as he drained half a bottle of water in one long gulp. Daniel wandered toward the station's office, peering through a grimy window. "This place is creepy. Looks like it's been closed since the 90s. "Probably couldn't compete when they built the interstate," Jake said, studying the crumbling structure. Something about the place felt off, though he couldn't pinpoint why. Years of military training had honed his instincts, taught him to notice when something didn't fit the pattern. His eyes scanned the property, the collapsed shed out back, the empty parking lot with weeds pushing through cracks in the concrete, the movement. Quick, furtive, behind a stack of old tires near the building's corner, Jake's hand instinctively went up, silencing the others. They recognized the gesture immediately, falling quiet and following his gaze. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then they saw it again. Definitely something alive, hiding in the shadows where the building blocked the sun. "Animal, maybe?" Raymond suggested, his paramedic instincts already alert. "Too deliberate," Jake murmured. He approached slowly, hands visible and non-threatening. "Hello? Anyone there? We're not here to cause trouble." The silence stretched taut. Then, barely audible over the wind, came a sound that made Jake's blood run cold. a child's whimper, quickly stifled as if the source feared making noise. "It's okay," Jake said softly, dropping to one knee 10 feet from the tires. The others had moved to flank him, forming a loose semicircle but keeping their distance. "We're not going to hurt you. Are you all right?" Another long pause. Then slowly, a small face emerged from behind the tires. A girl, maybe 7 years old, with tangled blonde hair and dirt-streaked cheeks. Her clothes, a pink t-shirt and denim shorts, were torn and filthy. What made Jake's jaw clench was the bruise on her left cheek, purple and yellow, clearly several days old. Her blue eyes were wide with terror, like a wild animal cornered by predators. "Jesus Christ," Tommy breathed behind him. "Hey there, sweetheart." Jake kept his voice gentle, the same tone he'd used with frightened children in Afghan villages. "My name's Jake. What's your name?" The girl didn't answer, pressing herself against the building's wall. Her eyes darted between the 5 large men and their motorcycles, calculating escape routes. Raymond slowly moved forward, lowering himself to Jake's level. "I'm Raymond. I'm a paramedic. That means I help people who are hurt." "Are you hurt? Do you need help?" The girl's eyes fixed on Raymond's face, searching for something. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her because she gave the tiniest nod. "Can you tell us your name?" Raymond tried again. "Dakota," she whispered, her voice hoarse as if she'd been crying or hadn't had water in hours. "Dakota Reynolds." "That's a beautiful name," Jake said. "Dakota, how long have you been out here?" Since yesterday morning, I think." Her lower lip trembled. "I ran away." Vincent, the gentlest of the group despite his intimidating size, slowly unscrewed his water bottle. "Dakota, honey, when's the last time you had something to drink?" Dakota's eyes locked onto the water bottle with desperate intensity. I don't remember." "Here." Vincent carefully approached and held out the bottle, keeping his movements slow and predictable. "It's nice and cold. You can have it all." Dakota hesitated, then lunged forward and grabbed the bottle with both hands, drinking so fast water spilled down her chin. She drained the entire container in seconds, then gasped for air. "Easy, easy," Raymond cautioned. "Not too fast or you'll get sick. Here, take mine too, but slower this time, okay?" As Dakota accepted the second bottle, Jake exchanged glances with the others. They all saw what he saw, the bruise, the torn clothes, the way she flinched when Daniel shifted his weight. The fear that went deeper than just being lost. This child was running from something or someone. "Dakota," Jake said carefully, "where are your parents? Are they looking for you?" The reaction was immediate and visceral. Dakota's face crumpled, tears spilling down her dirty cheeks. "I can't go back," she cried. "Please don't make me go back. He'll hurt me again." The 5 men stood frozen, the implications of her words hitting like physical blows. Jake felt the familiar burn of anger in his chest, the same rage he'd felt seeing innocents harmed in war zones. Beside him, he could sense the others struggling with the same fury and the desperate need to help. "Nobody's going to make you go anywhere you don't want to go," Jake promised, though he wasn't sure how he'd keep that promise. "But we need to understand what's happening so we can help you properly. Can you tell us what you're running from?" Dakota wiped her nose with the back of her hand, leaving a clean streak across the dirt. "My mum. She's gone a lot. Works 2 jobs. And her boyfriend Randy, he gets mad when I make noise or get in his way. He said I was a burden. Yesterday he hit me really hard, and I heard him tell Mum he was done dealing with me." The words tumbled out now, as if a dam had broken. "I got scared. So when they were asleep, I took some money from Mum's purse and walked to the bus stop. But I got on the wrong bus and ended up way out here. Then I ran out of money and didn't know what to do, so I hid." Raymond's face had gone pale. "Dakota, do you know what town you're from?" "Globe," she said. "We live in Globe." Jake's mind raced. Globe was a small mining town about 40 miles east of here. Dakota had somehow made it this far on her own, terrified and desperate enough to brave the desert rather than return to abuse. Daniel pulled out his phone, then cursed softly. "No signal, we're too far out." "We need to call the police," Vincent said quietly. "Child Protective Services. Get her somewhere safe." Dakota's eyes went wild again. "No, they'll send me back. They always send kids back." "That's not true, sweetheart," Raymond said gently. "When a child is in danger—" "I heard about it at school," Dakota interrupted, her voice rising toward panic. "Jenny Morrison's dad hurt her, and they took her away but then gave her back, and he hurt her worse." "I can't go back to Randy." Jake held up his hands, trying to project calm. "Dakota, look at me. Look right at me." He waited until her frightened eyes met his. "I was a soldier. Do you know what that means? It means I made a promise to protect people, especially kids, and I don't break my promises. We will figure this out, but we need to be smart about it. First things first, are you hungry?" The question seemed to derail her panic. Dakota nodded hesitantly. Tommy immediately dug into his saddlebag. "I've got granola bars, beef jerky, an apple." He laid items out on his bike seat. "Not gourmet, but it's food." As Dakota cautiously approached and began eating the granola bar with the same desperate speed she'd drunk the water, the five men moved slightly away, forming a tight huddle. "What the hell do we do?" Daniel whispered urgently. "We can't just take her. That's kidnapping, technically." "We can't leave her here either," Vincent countered. "And we can't send her back to someone who's abusing her." "CPS exists for a reason," Raymond said, though his voice lacked conviction. "There are procedures, safeguards." "That don't always work," Jake finished grimly. "I've seen it before. Overwhelmed system, kids falling through cracks." He looked back at Dakota, who was watching them while chewing mechanically on the granola bar. "But she's right to be scared. If we call from here, local police might just return her pending investigation. By the time anyone sorts it out, she could be back in that house." "So, what are you suggesting?" Tommy asked, though his tone indicated he already knew. Jake took a deep breath, knowing he was about to cross a line. "We get her somewhere safe first. A proper safe place, not just a shelter that might release her to her mother. Then we make sure, absolutely sure, that when we do contact authorities, she's protected. My sister Carolyn works for a children's advocacy center in Flagstaff. She knows how to navigate the system, how to make sure kids like Dakota don't get lost in bureaucracy or sent back to dangerous situations. Flagstaff's 3 hours from here," Daniel pointed out, "and we'd be transporting a minor without parental consent." Raymond added, "That's serious." "So is letting a 7-year-old die of dehydration in the desert or sending her back to an abuser." Jake shot back. "Look, I know this isn't by the book, but sometimes the book is written wrong. We get her to Carolyn, who can contact the right people and make sure this is handled right. Dakota gets proper care, proper documentation of her injuries, and proper advocacy." Vincent nodded slowly. "I'm in. We don't abandon people in need." "Same," Tommy said without hesitation. Daniel looked anguished, torn between law-abiding instincts and moral imperatives. Finally, he nodded. "If we do this, we do it right. We document everything, we make the call as soon as we can, and we make absolutely certain she's protected." Raymond was the last to agree, his medical training warring with his desire to help. "All right, but we stop at the first place with cell service and call your sister. I want her looped in immediately." "Agreed," Jake said. He turned back to Dakota, who was watching them with the wariness of someone who'd learned not to trust adults. "Dakota, we want to help you, but we need you to trust us a little bit. We have a friend in Flagstaff who helps kids who are in trouble. She's my sister, and she's really good at making sure kids stay safe. Would you be willing to ride with us up there? It's a few hours away." Dakota looked at the 5 large men, their leather vests bearing the Desert Rider's patch, an eagle soaring over desert mountains. Logic said she should be terrified. But something in Jake's eyes, in the way all of them had approached her with gentleness rather than aggression, made her feel safer than she'd felt in months. "You promise you won't take me back to Randy?" she asked, her small voice breaking Jake's heart. "I promise we'll do everything in our power to keep you safe," Jake said. "But Dakota, I need you to understand something. We're going to have to talk to police and social workers eventually. That's how we make sure you're protected for real, not just for today. But we're going to do it the right way, with people who will listen and believe you. Can you be brave enough to trust us on that?" Dakota considered this for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, but I've never been on a motorcycle." Despite the seriousness of the situation, Tommy grinned. "Well, today's your lucky day, kiddo. You're about to have the coolest ride of your life." 20 minutes later, they were back on the road. Dakota wore Raymond's spare helmet, comically large on her small head but properly secured. She rode with Vincent, whose bulk and gentle nature had seemed the least threatening to her. Vincent had fashioned a makeshift safety harness from bungee cords, ensuring she couldn't slip even if she fell asleep. She clung to his waist, her small frame pressed against his back. As they headed north toward Flagstaff, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they just stepped into something that would change all their lives. The desert stretched out before them, endless and unforgiving. But between them, wrapped in leather and protection, was a small girl who'd been brave enough to save herself. Now it was their turn to be brave enough to save her properly. The question was, would the law see it that way when everything came to light? Only time would tell. For now, they rode on, 5 unlikely heroes and the child they'd found in danger, racing toward an uncertain but hopefully safer future. The desert landscape gradually transformed as the Desert Riders climbed in elevation, trading the scorching flatlands for high desert terrain dotted with juniper and pinyon pine. The temperature dropped a few merciful degrees, though the sun still beat down with relentless intensity. Jake led the formation, his mind churning through possibilities and consequences with every mile that passed beneath his wheels. Behind him, Dakota had relaxed slightly against Vincent's back, though her small hand still gripped his vest with white-knuckled intensity. Vincent kept his speed steady and his movements smooth, hyper-aware of his precious cargo. Every few minutes he'd glance down to check on her, and each time he saw those big blue eyes staring out from behind his helmet visor, taking in the landscape rushing past. They'd been riding for 45 minutes when Tommy's voice crackled through the helmet comm. "Jake, we need to stop soon. Kid probably needs a bathroom break, and we should get some real food in her." "Agreed," Raymond added. "I want to check her over too. Make sure she doesn't have any injuries beyond what we've seen. Dehydration, exposure, we need to assess properly." Jake checked his GPS. "There's a small town coming up, Payson. Should have cell service there too. We can call Carolyn, get Dakota checked out, grab supplies." "Copy that," Daniel responded. As they crested a hill, the town of Payson spread below them, nestled in a valley surrounded by Mogollon Rim country. It was larger than the abandoned gas station, but still carried that small-town Arizona atmosphere. Local diners, family-owned shops, pickup trucks parked at angle along the main street. Jake led them to a diner called Mountain View Cafe, parking in the shade of tall ponderosa pines that grew behind the building. The 5 motorcycles rumbling into the parking lot drew immediate attention from the handful of patrons visible through the diner's windows. Jake was used to the stares. People either loved bikers or feared them, with little middle ground. The Desert Riders had always been scrupulously law-abiding, avoiding the outlaw reputation that plagued some clubs, but they still carried the aesthetic. Leather, patches, road-worn and weather-beaten faces. Vincent carefully helped Dakota dismount, his big hand steadying her until she found her footing. Without the helmet, Her appearance was even more alarming. The bruise on her face stark against pale skin, her hair a tangled mess, clothes torn and filthy. "Okay, sweetheart." Jake knelt beside her. "We're going to go inside, get some food. Let Raymond check and make sure you're all right. Can you do something for me, though? If anyone asks, can you say you're Vincent's niece? Just for now, until we can make those important calls?" Dakota looked uncertain. "Isn't that lying?" "It is," Jake admitted, respecting her intelligence. "And I don't like asking you to lie, but we need a little time to set things up properly, and sometimes grown-up problems require complicated solutions. Once we talk to my sister, we'll tell everyone the truth, I promise." Dakota considered this, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but just until we call your sister." "Deal!" Jake extended his hand, and they shook on it solemnly. The diner's interior was classic Americana. Vinyl booths, a long counter with chrome-topped stools, walls decorated with vintage photographs of Payson's mining and logging history. A woman in her 50s stood behind the counter, her expression shifting from wariness to concern as she took in Dakota's appearance. "Afternoon," Jake said, offering his most disarming smile. "Party of 6. Booth if you've got one." The waitress, whose name tag read Beverly, grabbed menus. "Booth in the back work?" Her eyes kept returning to Dakota. "Honey, are you all right?" "She's my niece," Vincent said smoothly, placing a protective hand on Dakota's shoulder. "Had a little tumble on the hiking trail yesterday. Kids, you know, they bounce back, but it looks worse than it is." Beverly's skeptical expression suggested she wasn't entirely buying the story, but she led them to a booth anyway. The men arranged themselves strategically, Dakota wedged between Jake and Vincent on one side, Raymond across from her where he could observe her medically, Daniel and Tommy on the ends serving as buffers from other patrons. "I'll get you folks some water," Beverly said, "and take your order when you're ready." She walked away slowly, glancing back once with obvious concern. "We've got maybe 20 minutes before she calls someone," Daniel murmured. That look said she's suspicious. "Then we work fast," Jake said. He pulled out his phone, 2 bars of service, enough to make a call. "Raymond, you check Dakota. Rest of you order food. I'm calling Carolyn." Jake stepped outside, hitting his sister's contact. It rang 3 times before her familiar voice answered. "Jake, aren't you on your ride? What's wrong?" "Carolyn, I need your help. Professional help." Jake quickly outlined the situation, finding Dakota, her injuries, her fear, their decision to bring her to Flagstaff. To her credit, Carolyn didn't interrupt, letting him finish the entire story. When he was done, there was a long pause. "Jake, you know what you're describing is technically custodial interference at minimum, possibly kidnapping charges if this goes sideways." "I know," Jake said. "But Carr, if you'd seen her, hiding behind those tires like a wounded animal, the bruises, the terror in her eyes, I couldn't just leave her or hand her over to some local deputy who might not take it seriously." Another pause. Then, "Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to contact a colleague who specializes in emergency child protective orders. His name is Benjamin Foster, and he's a child advocacy attorney with connections throughout the state. We'll get documentation started immediately, photos of injuries, your statements, Dakota's account. But Jake, you need to understand that once I make this call, the clock is ticking. CPS will be involved, possibly law enforcement. Your role becomes witness and temporary protective party, nothing more. You can't just keep her. I know, I just want her safe, properly safe. Bring her straight here. Don't stop anywhere else. Don't talk to anyone else. My office is at the Flagstaff Children's Center on Milton Road. I'll be waiting, and I'll have Benjamin here too. We'll interview Dakota properly, document everything, and file an emergency protective order before the sun sets. And Jake, have someone take photos right now. Every visible injury time-stamped. That's critical evidence. Thank you, Carr. Thank me when this doesn't blow up in all our faces. Drive safe. And Jake, what you're doing. It's right, even if it's not legal. Sometimes those two things don't align perfectly. Jake returned inside to find Raymond conducting a careful examination of Dakota's arms and legs, checking for additional injuries while speaking to her in low, reassuring tones. Vincent had ordered what looked like enough food for 10 people. Burgers, fries, a grilled cheese for Dakota, milkshakes all around. Carolyn's looped in, Jake reported. She's getting an attorney involved, someone who specializes in this. But we need photos, documented evidence before we get there. Tommy pulled out his smartphone. I'll do it. I photograph custom bike builds for magazines. I know how to document details properly. Over the next 10 minutes, while Beverly shot increasingly suspicious looks from behind the counter, Tommy methodically photographed Dakota's injuries. The facial bruise, smaller bruises on her upper arms, consistent with being grabbed roughly, scrapes on her knees, the state of her torn clothing. Dakota endured it stoically, seeming to understand the importance, even if she didn't like the attention. The food arrived, and Dakota attacked her grilled cheese with the same desperate hunger she'd shown earlier. Raymond monitored her, ensuring she didn't eat too fast and make herself sick. When's the last time you had a real meal? Vincent asked gently. Dakota swallowed a bite, thinking. Tuesday, I think. At school. They had pizza. Randy doesn't like it when I eat a lot at home. Says I'm expensive enough already. The temperature at the table seemed to drop several degrees. Jake saw his own fury reflected in each of the other men's faces. This child had been systematically neglected and abused, made to feel like a burden in her own home. Well, you eat as much as you want now, Tommy said, pushing his own fries toward her. You're with us, and we've got plenty. Dakota looked up at him, something like wonder crossing her face. Why are you all being so nice to me? You don't even know me. Raymond leaned forward, his expression earnest. Dakota, I want you to understand something. What happened to you, what Randy did, that's not normal. That's not how adults are supposed to treat kids. Most people, when they see a child in trouble, they want to help. That's the normal thing. You just got unlucky and ended up with someone who forgot that. My mom says Randy's just stressed, Dakota said quietly. That his job is hard and I need to be quieter and better behaved. Your mom is wrong, Jake said flatly. I don't care how stressed someone is. There's no excuse for hitting a child. None. Ever. Dakota absorbed this, her young mind clearly struggling with information that contradicted what she'd been told. Are you going to get in trouble for helping me? The question hung in the air. Finally, Jake answered honestly. Maybe. Probably, actually. But that's okay. Some things are worth getting in trouble for. Top 5 worth-it trouble things, Vincent said, holding up fingers. Number 1, protecting kids. Number 2, protecting kids. Number 3... We get the picture, Daniel interrupted, but he was smiling. Despite everything, Dakota giggled, a small sound, but genuine. It was perhaps the first moment of lightness she'd experienced in days, and it transformed her face, showing glimpses of the happy child she should have been. Beverly approached with the check, and her eyes were softer now, though still concerned. She placed the bill down, then crouched beside the booth to be level with Dakota. Sweetheart, I'm a grandmother. I've got 5 grandkids of my own. If you need help, any kind of help, you can tell me. These fellas treating you right? Dakota looked at the 5 bikers, then back at Beverly. They saved me, she said simply. I was lost and scared, and they found me and gave me water and food, and they're taking me somewhere safe. Beverly studied Dakota's face, then Jake's, reading something in their expressions that satisfied her. All right then, you take care of this little one, she said to the men. World needs more folks willing to step up. Yes, ma'am, Jake replied, leaving a generous tip on the table. As they prepared to leave, Dakota tugged on Jake's vest. I need to use the bathroom. I'll take her, Vincent offered. He waited outside the women's restroom while Dakota went in. positioning himself where he could watch the door, while also keeping an eye on the diner's exit. When they regrouped outside by the bikes, the afternoon sun was past its peak, casting longer shadows across the parking lot. They had roughly 2 hours of riding left to reach Flagstaff. "Dakota, how are you feeling?" Raymond asked. "Any dizziness, nausea, headache?" "I'm okay," Dakota said. "Tired, but okay." "All right. We're going to ride a bit longer. Then you'll be at a place where people can really help you. Think you can hang on a bit more?" Dakota nodded, accepting the helmet from Vincent. As he secured it on her head, she looked up at him. "Thank you," she said softly. "All of you. I was really scared I was going to die out there." Vincent's eyes glistened suspiciously. "Well, you didn't. You're safe now. We've got you." As they mounted up and prepared to head out, Jake took one last look around Payson. This small town marked a turning point. Behind them was the desert where they'd found a terrified child. Ahead was Flagstaff and the beginning of whatever came next. Legal consequences, bureaucratic nightmares, possibly criminal charges for their good deed. But as he looked back at Dakota, securely fastened to Vincent's bike, her small helmet bobbing as she looked around with curious eyes, Jake knew they'd made the right choice. Sometimes the right choice and the legal choice weren't the same thing. Sometimes being a hero meant being willing to face consequences. He started his engine, the familiar rumble grounding him. The others followed suit, a chorus of motorcycle engines that sounded like thunder rolling through the mountains. Then they pulled out of the parking lot, 5 riders and 1 small girl, heading north towards safety, justice, and whatever fate awaited them all. The terrain grew increasingly mountainous as the desert riders pushed northward toward Flagstaff. Ponderosa pines crowded the roadsides now, their distinctive vanilla-scented bark a sharp contrast to the desert sage they'd left behind. The temperature had dropped into the comfortable 70s, and the quality of light had shifted to that golden glow that precedes evening. Jake's mind should have been on the winding road, but instead it churned through increasingly complicated scenarios. What they'd done, what they were doing, existed in a legal gray area at best, potentially criminal territory at worst. He'd acted on instinct and moral certainty, but the world didn't always reward those things. The law was meant to protect children like Dakota, but it was also a blunt instrument that didn't always account for nuance. His comm crackled. "Jake, we've got a problem." Daniel's voice carried an edge of tension. Jake glanced in his mirror. Behind the formation, maybe half a mile back, he spotted what Daniel had seen. Flashing red and blue lights, a police cruiser gaining on them. "Stay calm," Jake instructed. "We haven't done anything wrong traffic-wise. Might be headed somewhere else." But even as he said it, he knew it was wishful thinking. The cruiser closed the distance, then activated its siren. There was no ambiguity. They were being pulled over. "Damn it," Tommy muttered over the comm. "Everyone stay cool," Jake ordered. "Pull over slow and steady. Let me do the talking. Vincent, keep Dakota calm." They reduced speed and eased onto a wide shoulder overlooking a valley of pine forest. The cruiser pulled in behind them, blocking any retreat. Jake killed his engine, removed his helmet, and placed his hands visible on his handlebars. The others followed suit, a choreographed display of non-threatening compliance learned from years of dealing with law enforcement suspicion toward bikers. The officer who emerged was young, maybe late 20s, with the rigid posture of someone early in their career. His name tag read, Officer Jennings. His hand rested on his service weapon as he approached, eyes scanning the group with professional wariness. "Afternoon, officer," Jake said evenly. "Something wrong?" "License and registration," Jennings said, his voice clipped. "All of you." As they complied, producing documents from wallet pockets, Jennings's attention fixed on Dakota. His expression shifted from wary to alert. "Who's the girl?" "My niece," Vincent answered, the lie coming easier the second time. Yeah? What's her name? Dakota, Vincent said. Dakota what? Vincent hesitated a fraction too long. Dakota Cooper, my brother's kid. Jennings's eyes narrowed. Step off the bike, all of you. Hands where I can see them. Jake's heart sank. They were blown. Somehow word had gotten out. Maybe Beverly had called it in despite her apparent sympathy, or maybe Dakota had been reported missing by her mother. Either way, they were in trouble now. They dismounted slowly, keeping movements deliberate and non-threatening. Dakota clung to Vincent, her face pale with renewed fear. Dakota, Jennings said, moderating his tone slightly. Are you all right? Did these men hurt you? No, Dakota said immediately. They helped me. They found me when I was hiding and gave me water and food, and they're taking me somewhere safe. Jennings' expression complicated. He keyed his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I've got a possible 647 situation, requesting backup and CPS notification. Highway 87, mile marker 312. Copy that, Unit 7. Backup en route, ETA 12 minutes. Officer, Jake said carefully, I understand how this looks, but if you'll let me explain... Sir, you need to remain silent, Jennings interrupted. I've got 5 adult males transporting an unrelated minor with visible injuries across county lines. Until I sort out what's happening here, nobody says anything without legal representation present. They saved me! Dakota's voice rose toward hysteria. I ran away because Randy hurt me and they found me and they're helping. Who's Randy? Jennings asked. My mom's boyfriend. He hits me and says I'm a burden and I was so scared. Tears streamed down Dakota's face now. Please don't send me back to him. Jennings' professional mask cracked slightly, revealing the human underneath. Nobody's sending you anywhere right now, sweetheart. But I need to figure out what's going on. Are you Dakota Reynolds from Globe? Dakota nodded miserably. Your mother reported you missing yesterday morning. Half the county's been looking for you. I bet Randy's real broken up about it, Dakota said bitterly, her child's voice dripping with sarcasm that should have been foreign to a 7-year-old. Before Jennings could respond, 2 more cruisers arrived, followed by an unmarked sedan. The new arrivals included an older officer with sergeant stripes and a woman in her 40s carrying the wary professionalism of a social worker. The sergeant, whose name tag identified him as Martinez, took command immediately. What have we got, Jennings? Missing child from Globe, 5 males transporting her. Girl claims they rescued her, that she ran away from abuse. Martinez's eyes swept over the scene, taking in details with the efficiency of long experience. Anyone armed? Just standard pocket knives, Jennings reported. He checked while waiting for backup. Dakota Reynolds? The social worker approached gently, her voice warm but professional. I'm Angela Patterson from Child Protective Services. Can you tell me what happened? Dakota, exhausted and overwhelmed, started crying in earnest. Vincent instinctively moved to comfort her, but Jennings blocked him. Sir, stay where you are. She's scared, Vincent protested. We're not the threat here. That's for us to determine, Martinez said. He looked at Angela. Can you take the child to your vehicle, get her statement privately? No! Dakota struggled toward Vincent. Don't take me away from them. They're the only ones who helped me. The scene was deteriorating rapidly. Jake made a split-second decision. Sergeant Martinez, my name is Jake Harrison. I'm a veteran, 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines. These are my riding brothers, all law-abiding citizens. We found Dakota yesterday at an abandoned gas station on Highway 60, dehydrated and hiding. She was clearly in distress, had visible injuries, and told us she was running from abuse. I have a sister, Carolyn Harrison, who works at the Flagstaff Children's Center as a child advocate. We were transporting Dakota there to ensure she received proper care and proper handling of her case. My sister is expecting us and has a child advocacy attorney standing by. Martinez studied Jake for a long moment. You should have called police immediately." In retrospect, yes, sir. That would have been by the book. But Dakota was terrified of being returned to her abuser. We made a judgment call to get her somewhere we knew she'd be safe and properly advocated for before involving the system. "That's not your call to make," Martinez said, but his tone was less harsh. "You do-gooders don't seem to realize you can make things worse by interfering. With respect, sir, worse than leaving a 7-year-old to die of exposure in the desert? Worse than returning her immediately to an abusive situation." Martinez's jaw tightened. He looked at Angela. "What's protocol here?" "I take custody of the child, interview her, document injuries, contact the family," Angela said. "If abuse allegations are substantiated, we file for emergency protective custody." "Her mother's boyfriend is Randy Simmons," Jennings interjected, checking his notes. "Address in Globe." Martinez's expression shifted. "Randy Simmons, that name familiar. Wasn't he picked up for domestic disturbance last year?" Jennings recalled. "Charges dropped when the girlfriend refused to testify?" "Yeah," Martinez said slowly. He looked at Dakota with new understanding, then back at the 5 bikers. "All right, here's what's going to happen. Angela takes Dakota, documents everything, does the interview. You 5 are detained pending investigation, but not arrested, yet. We contact this sister in Flagstaff, verify your story. If it checks out, and if CPS determines you acted in the child's best interest, we might let this slide as a misguided good deed. If any part of your story doesn't check out, you're all facing serious charges. Clear?" "Crystal clear," Jake said. "Thank you for listening." "Don't thank me yet," Martinez said. But there was something in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, that these weren't predators, but protectors who'd made a questionable choice for right reasons. Angela approached Dakota slowly. "Sweetheart, I know you're scared, but I promise my job is to protect kids. I want to hear your story, all of it, and I want to make sure you're safe. Can you come with me just for a little bit? These men will be right here." Dakota looked at Jake, her eyes pleading. "You promised." "I know," Jake said softly. "And I meant it. But this is part of how we make sure you're safe for real. Mrs. Patterson is one of the good guys. Tell her everything, Dakota. Tell her about Randy, about what made you run, all of it. And we'll be right here when you're done. You won't leave." Dakota's voice was tiny. "Not going anywhere," Vincent promised. Reluctantly, Dakota allowed Angela to lead her to the sedan. As they drove a short distance down the road to conduct the interview privately, the 5 bikers stood under the watchful eyes of 3 police officers, united in anxious waiting. "You know you guys are crazy, right?" Jennings said, though his tone lacked heat. "You can't just pick up stray kids and decide to relocate them across county lines." "Probably," Tommy agreed. "But crazy and wrong aren't always the same thing." Martinez was on his phone, presumably calling Carolyn. Jake could only hear one side of the conversation, but Martinez's expression gradually shifted from skeptical to thoughtful, to something approaching respect. 20 minutes passed. The sun continued its descent toward the horizon, painting the pine forests in shades of amber and gold. Jake's legs ached from standing, and his mind played through worst-case scenarios. Criminal charges, losing his job, the Desert Riders disbanded, all because they'd tried to help a child. Finally, the sedan returned. Angela emerged, and her expression was grim as she approached Martinez for a private consultation. They spoke in low tones, Angela showing him something on her tablet, photos most likely. When Martinez returned to the bikers, his demeanor had shifted. "Miss Patterson has documented extensive evidence of ongoing abuse. Multiple bruises in various stages of healing, burn marks on her lower back from cigarettes, signs of malnutrition. Dakota's statement corroborates your account and adds significant detail about the abuse she's endured. CPS is filing for emergency protective custody right now. The mother will be contacted, and Randy Simmons is about to have a very bad day. Jake felt something unclench in his chest. Is Dakota all right? Scared, exhausted, traumatized, but physically stable, Martinez said. Miss Patterson is arranging temporary foster placement in Flagstaff. Your sister's organization will be involved in the ongoing case management. He paused. I'm still not happy about your vigilante rescue operation. You should have contacted authorities immediately, but he seemed to struggle with the admission. Dakota said something that stuck with me. She said she prayed someone would find her before she died, and then you five showed up. Said you treated her with more kindness in 6 hours than she'd known in 6 months. So here's what's going to happen. I'm filing a report that notes your cooperation, your clear intent to protect rather than harm, and CPS's recommendation that no charges be pressed. The DA might still take a look, but I'll add my recommendation for leniency based on circumstances and outcome. Thank you, Jake said, meaning it deeply. Don't do it again, Martinez said sternly. Next time you find a kid in trouble, you call 911 immediately. We're not all incompetent or corrupt. Most of us got into this job to help people, same as you, military types. Understood, sir. Angela approached with Dakota, who immediately ran to Vincent and wrapped her arms around his waist. They're letting me go to Flagstaff, she said. Miss Patterson says there's a really nice foster family who takes emergency placements, and they've got a dog. That sounds perfect, Vincent said, his voice rough with emotion. She also says you can visit. Dakota looked up at him hopefully. Is that true? Will you come see me? The 5 men exchanged glances. Raymond spoke for all of them. Dakota, we'll visit as much as they'll let us. You're part of the Desert Riders family now. We don't abandon family. What's a Desert Rider? Dakota asked. It's our motorcycle club, Tommy explained. We ride together, watch out for each other, help people when we can. And you, little miss, are officially our first honorary member. Dakota's smile was like sunrise after a long night, tentative but brilliant. Really, really, Jake confirmed. Now, you need to go with Miss Patterson. She's going to take good care of you while all the grown-up legal stuff gets sorted out. But we'll check on you, I promise. As Angela guided Dakota toward her sedan, the girl turned back one more time. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for not leaving me there. Thank you for being brave enough to save yourself, Jake called back. We just helped a little. They watched the sedan drive away, carrying Dakota toward a future that, while uncertain, was infinitely better than what she'd fled. The police presence gradually dispersed, Martinez and Jennings driving off after final warnings and paperwork. Suddenly, the 5 bikers were alone on the quiet highway as evening settled over the mountains. Well, Daniel finally broke the silence. That was the most illegal good deed I've ever participated in. Worth it, though, Vincent said firmly. Absolutely worth it, Tommy agreed. Raymond looked at Jake. Your sister's probably going to kill you when we actually get there. Jake laughed, the sound carrying relief and residual adrenaline. Yeah, probably, but that's a small price to pay. They mounted their bikes, engines rumbling to life in the gathering dusk. Flagstaff was only an hour away now, and while they wouldn't be arriving with Dakota as planned, they'd still go to give statements, to coordinate with Carolyn, to start the process of ensuring Dakota's safety extended beyond this single day. As they rode through the pine-scented twilight, Jake reflected on the strange path that had led them here. They'd started the day planning a simple weekend ride through beautiful country. They were ending it as participants in a child rescue that might still land them in legal hot water. But sometimes life demanded you step up, consequences be damned. Sometimes being a hero was messy and complicated and didn't follow the rules. And sometimes, Jake thought as he accelerated into a curve, that was exactly how it should be. The Flagstaff Children's Center occupied a converted Victorian house on Milton Road. its welcoming architecture deliberately chosen to be less intimidating than institutional buildings. Jake and the Desert Riders arrived just as the last light faded from the sky, parking their motorcycles in the side lot beneath street lamps that cast orange pools of light. Carolyn Harrison waited on the front porch, arms crossed, her expression a complex mixture of relief, exasperation, and grudging pride. At 42, she shared Jake's strong jawline and intense eyes, but where his face was weathered by sun and experience, hers carried the particular exhaustion of someone who fought daily battles against a system that didn't always protect the vulnerable as well as it should. "You're an idiot," were her first words as Jake climbed the porch steps. "Nice to see you too, sis." "A well-intentioned idiot who got incredibly lucky," Carolyn continued. "Sergeant Martinez called ahead. He said if Dakota's case hadn't been so clear-cut, you'd all be in lockup right now." "But we're not," Jake said. "And Dakota's safe, that's what matters." Carolyn's stern expression cracked. "Yeah, she is." She opened the door, gesturing them inside. "Come on. Benjamin Foster is here, the attorney I mentioned. We need statements from all of you while everything's fresh. And Jake, despite my urge to strangle you, I'm proud of what you did. Stupid, legally questionable, but fundamentally right." The interior of the center was warm and welcoming, soft lighting, comfortable furniture, walls painted in soothing colors. They were led to a conference room where a man in his 50s sat reviewing documents on a laptop. Benjamin Foster looked up as they entered, his sharp eyes assessing each of them in turn. "The Desert Riders, I presume," Benjamin said, standing to shake hands. His grip was firm, his demeanor professional, but not unfriendly. "I've been reviewing the preliminary CPS reports. You gentlemen stepped into a complicated situation and, despite some procedural irregularities, achieved a positive outcome. Now we need to ensure that outcome becomes permanent." Over the next 2 hours, they provided detailed statements. How they'd found Dakota, her condition, her statements about abuse, their decision-making process, the journey north, the police stop. Benjamin asked probing questions, occasionally making notes, building a comprehensive timeline. "The good news," Benjamin said when they'd finished, "is that CPS has documented extensive evidence of abuse. The burn marks alone are damning. That's intentional harm, not accidental injury. Combined with Dakota's detailed and consistent testimony, we have a strong case for permanent removal from the home." "What happens to her mother?" Raymond asked. Dakota mentioned she works 2 jobs. "Is she complicit or just overwhelmed?" "That's for CPS and potentially criminal investigators to determine," Benjamin replied. "Sometimes parents are active abusers. Sometimes they're enablers who turn blind eyes. Sometimes they're victims themselves who failed to protect their children." From Dakota's statement, it sounds like her mother worked long hours and either didn't know or didn't want to know the full extent of what Randy was doing. "That's not good enough," Vincent said, his voice tight with anger. "She's the mother. It's her job to protect her kid." "I don't disagree," Benjamin said, "but the legal system will make that determination. Our job right now is ensuring Dakota's immediate and long-term safety." "What's the timeline?" Jake asked. "CPS has placed Dakota with the Morrison family, experienced foster parents here in Flagstaff," Carolyn explained. "They've cared for dozens of emergency placements over the years. Dakota will stay there while we file for a formal dependency hearing. That will happen within 72 hours. At that hearing, a judge will determine temporary custody arrangements pending a full investigation." "Can we see her?" Tommy asked. "We told her we'd visit." Carolyn and Benjamin exchanged glances. "That's complicated," Carolyn said carefully. "You're not family. Your role in this situation is unusual. Legally, you're witnesses and temporary protectors, but you have no custodial rights or familial connection." "But she trusts us," Vincent protested. She's been through hell and we're the ones who pulled her out. You're saying we just disappear now? I'm saying it's not my decision alone, Carolyn said gently. The Morrisons would need to approve visits, and CPS would need to sign off. You'd likely need background checks, supervised visitation at first. The system is designed to protect children from potential harm, which means it's cautious about who has access. We're not a threat to her, Daniel said, frustration evident. I know that. You know that. But the system doesn't know that yet, Benjamin explained. Here's what I suggest. We file character references for each of you, get those background checks started immediately, and I'll personally request that you be allowed supervised visits as part of Dakota's support system. Given that you demonstrably acted in her best interest and that she's formed an attachment to you, I think we can make a compelling case. But it won't be immediate, and it won't be unsupervised at first. The reality of bureaucracy settled over them like a weight. They'd saved Dakota from immediate danger, but now she was caught in a system that, however well-intentioned, moved slowly and treated everyone with suspicion until proven otherwise. How long? Jake asked. Background checks can be expedited. Maybe 72 hours if we push, Carolyn said. First supervised visit could happen by early next week if everything clears and the Morrisons agree. That's 5 days, Tommy said. 5 days where Dakota thinks we abandoned her like everyone else in her life. We can pass messages through CPS, Carolyn offered. Let her know you're working on visiting, that you haven't forgotten her. It wasn't enough, but it was what they had. One by one, they provided information for background checks, signed authorization forms, gave character references. Raymond provided his paramedic credentials. Daniel offered references from his school principal. Vincent gave contact information for the construction company where he'd worked for 15 years. Tommy provided business licenses for his motorcycle shop. Jake supplied his military service records and VA contact information. I'll have preliminary results by Friday, Benjamin promised, and I'll personally advocate for visitation rights at Dakota's dependency hearing. What you did, however unorthodox, showed genuine concern for a child's welfare. That matters. As they prepared to leave, Carolyn pulled Jake aside. Can I talk to you alone for a minute? The others headed outside, leaving the siblings in the quiet conference room. Carolyn studied her brother for a long moment. You scared me today, she said finally. When you called and told me what you'd done, I saw your entire future potentially going up in flames. Criminal record, job loss, reputation destroyed, all because you acted on instinct instead of calling the proper authorities. I know. But you also saved a little girl's life, Carolyn continued, her eyes glistening. Not just from immediate danger, but potentially from years more abuse. If you'd called local police from that gas station, there's a real chance she'd have been returned to her mother pending investigation. Randy might have intimidated her into silence or worse. Instead, she's in a safe home with documented evidence and professional advocacy. You did that. We did that, Jake corrected. All 5 of us. All 5 idiots, Carolyn said, but she was smiling. You know what Dakota told Angela Patterson during the interview? She said she'd prayed for angels to save her and instead got motorcycle riders who were better than angels because they were real and kind and didn't let her be scared anymore. How do you respond to something like that? Jake felt his throat tighten. We just did what anyone should do. But most people don't. Most people see a problem and find reasons why it's not their responsibility. You saw a child in danger and made it your responsibility. Consequences be damned. That's either incredibly stupid or incredibly noble. Probably both. Definitely both, Jake agreed. Carolyn hugged him, fierce and quick. Go home, get some rest. I'll call you the second I have news about visitation. And Jake, thank you for still being the kind of person who steps up when it matters. Outside, the desert night had turned cold, as it always did at elevation. The 4 other riders stood by their motorcycles, breath visible in the chill air. They'd started this morning as a group out for a weekend ride. They were ending it as something more. Witnesses to trauma, participants in rescue, defendants in potential legal proceedings, and reluctant heroes to a child they'd known for less than a day. So, Tommy broke the silence, that was the most eventful ride we've ever taken. Understatement of the century, Raymond said. We did good though, right? Vincent asked, and there was vulnerability in the question. We helped her? We absolutely helped her, Jake said firmly. Everything else, the legal complications, the bureaucracy, the waiting, that's just noise. Dakota was dying in that desert, and now she's safe and warm and fed and protected. That's what matters. When do we ride again? Daniel asked. Jake looked at his brothers, bound now not just by shared roads, but by shared purpose and shared risk. Next weekend, if we're not in jail, same time, same place. And if we see another kid in trouble? Tommy asked. Jake grinned. Then I guess we call my sister first this time, but we still help. That's who we are now. They mounted their motorcycles, engines growling to life in the quiet residential street. As they pulled away from the children's center, Jake glanced back once at the Victorian house with its warm lights. Somewhere in Flagstaff, Dakota was hopefully sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, surrounded by people whose job was to protect her. The ride back to Phoenix took 3 hours, the desert highway unfurling beneath their wheels under a canopy of stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. Jake felt exhausted but not depleted, satisfied in a way he hadn't felt since leaving the military. He'd found a mission again, a purpose beyond just surviving day to day. Sometimes heroism looked like soldiers in combat zones. Sometimes it looked like 5 middle-aged bikers who stopped at an abandoned gas station and chose to care about a stranger's child. Sometimes the most heroic thing you could do was simply refuse to look away when someone needed help. As Phoenix's lights appeared on the horizon, Jake made a silent promise to Dakota and to himself. Whatever came next, legal battles, supervised visitations, years of being peripheral figures in a child's recovery, they'd see it through. The desert riders had found their purpose on a hot Arizona highway, and they weren't riding away from it now. 3 months later, November brought cooler temperatures to Arizona and a new rhythm to the desert riders' lives. The dependency hearing had gone as well as Benjamin Foster predicted. Dakota was permanently removed from her mother's custody. Randy Simmons faced criminal charges for child abuse, and the Morrisons were approved as long-term foster parents, pending a permanent placement decision. The background checks on all 5 bikers had come back clean, and after 2 supervised visits, CPS approved unsupervised time. Now, every Saturday afternoon, the desert riders made the trip to Flagstaff to spend time with Dakota. Jake pulled his motorcycle into the Morrisons' driveway, the familiar crunch of gravel announcing his arrival. The house was a modest ranch style in a quiet neighborhood, with a large backyard where a golden retriever named Buster barked joyfully at the sound of motorcycles. The other 4 riders pulled in behind him, and before they'd even removed their helmets, the front door burst open. "They're here!" Dakota's voice rang out, and she came running down the driveway, her blonde hair, now clean and neatly braided, flying behind her. She'd gained weight, the gaunt hollows in her cheeks filled out with regular meals. The bruises had long faded, though Jake knew the emotional scars would take longer to heal. Vincent dismounted and caught her as she launched herself at him. "Hey there, junior rider. How was your week?" "Good. I got an A on my spelling test and Mrs. Morrison taught me how to make cookies, and Buster learned a new trick. Watch." She demonstrated getting the dog to shake hands, her face glowing with pride. Carol Morrison emerged from the house, a woman in her late 50s with kind eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who dedicated her life to helping wounded children heal. Her husband David followed behind, carrying a tray of lemonade. "Gentlemen?" Carol greeted warmly. She's been watching the window since noon. Sorry we're late, Jake said. Traffic on the 17 was backed up. You're not late, she's just eager, David said with a smile. He'd been skeptical of the bikers at first. 5 leather-clad men wanting access to a traumatized child raised red flags. But over the past 3 months, he'd watched them show up without fail, patient and gentle, giving Dakota something she'd never had before, reliable male figures who treated her with kindness. They settled in the backyard, Dakota holding court like a tiny queen with her devoted subjects. She'd brought out drawings from school, houses with smiling families, horses, flowers, and one that featured 5 motorcycles with stick figures that made Jake's heart clench. That's us, Dakota explained unnecessarily. That's Jake in front because he's the leader, and that's Vincent because he's the biggest, and Tommy with the tools because he fixes things, and Daniel with a book because he's a teacher, and Raymond with the medical cross because he's a paramedic. It's perfect, Raymond said, accepting the drawing like it was precious art. Can I keep it? I made one for each of you. Dakota produced more papers, distributing them proudly. Tommy examined his drawing, pointing to a detail. Is that supposed to be grease on my hands? Yes, because you always have grease under your nails from fixing motorcycles. That's extremely accurate and slightly embarrassing. They spent the afternoon teaching Dakota card games, helping her practice reading from a book about horses and listening to detailed explanations of second-grade social dynamics. Carol brought out sandwiches and cookies, and they picnicked on blankets in the autumn sunshine. As the afternoon wore on, Carol caught Jake's eye and gestured toward the house. He followed her inside to the kitchen, where she poured 2 cups of coffee. I wanted to talk to you about something, Carol began. Dakota's doing really well. Therapy is helping. She's thriving in school. The nightmares are less frequent. A lot of that is because she feels safe here, but a lot of it is also because of you 5. We just visit, Jake said. You and David are doing the real work. You're doing more than you know, Carol said. She talks about you constantly. You've given her something crucial, proof that men can be trustworthy and kind. After what she experienced with Randy, that's not a small thing. Jake sensed there was more. But she's getting attached, very attached. And while that's good for her healing, I need to know what your long-term intentions are. Are you 5 planning to stay in her life? Because if this is a temporary good deed that you'll eventually move on from, I need to start preparing her for that now. The question was fair and necessary. Jake considered his answer carefully. Carol, I can't speak for the others definitively, but I can tell you this. When we found Dakota, something changed for all of us. We'd been riding together for years, but it was recreational, something to do on weekends. Dakota gave us purpose. She made us better men because we wanted to be the kind of men worthy of her trust. He met Carol's eyes. We're not going anywhere. As long as Dakota wants us in her life, we'll be here. Carol studied him, then nodded, satisfied. Good, because I want to discuss something that Benjamin Foster brought up last week. David and I are approved for long-term foster care, but we're in our late 50s. We can provide stability for a few more years, but we're not going to be her forever family. The state is going to start looking for either a reunification plan with her mother, which seems unlikely given Randy's trial and her mother's continued denial, or an adoptive placement. Jake's heart rate picked up. Okay. Benjamin suggested something unusual. He asked if any of you would consider being evaluated as potential adoptive parents. The words hung in the air like a challenge and an opportunity. Jake's mind raced. Him, a father. He lived alone, worked irregular hours, had a history of PTSD from his military service that he managed but still struggled with. He was 45 years old, single, with a lifestyle built around motorcycles and solitude. I don't know if I'd be approved, Jake said slowly. I'm single, I have PTSD. Single parents adopt all the time. Carol interrupted gently. And PTSD isn't disqualifying if it's managed, which yours clearly is. I've watched you with Dakota, Jake. You're patient, attentive, and she trusts you completely. You'd need to make lifestyle adjustments, certainly, but if you're serious about staying in her life, this could be a path to making that permanent. Can I think about it? Of course. This isn't a decision to make lightly. Talk to the others too. Benjamin mentioned Vincent and Raymond as possibilities, though their situations are different. Carol squeezed his shoulder. Just think about it. Because that little girl out there deserves a family that chooses her, and I think you already have. When Jake returned to the backyard, Dakota was attempting to teach Daniel a complicated hand clap game while the others watched with amusement. She looked up when Jake approached, her smile bright and uncomplicated. Jake, come learn this. It's really hard but fun. He sat down beside her, letting her position his hands and explain the rhythm. As she counted out the pattern, clap, clap, slap, slap, snap, he watched her face, animated and joyful, so different from the terrified child hiding behind tires 3 months ago. Could he do this? Could he restructure his entire life around being a father to this child? The question terrified him, but as Dakota dissolved into giggles when he messed up the pattern for the 3rd time, Jake felt something settle in his chest. Not certainty exactly, but possibility. The visit ended as they always did, with prolonged goodbyes and promises to return next week. Dakota hugged each of them fiercely, making them promise to ride safe and text when they got home. As they mounted their motorcycles, she stood on the porch with Buster, waving until they rounded the corner out of sight. The ride back to Phoenix was quiet, each man lost in his own thoughts. They stopped at their usual diner halfway home, settling into a booth with coffee and pie. Carol talked to you, Vincent said to Jake. It wasn't a question. Yeah, about adoption. Did she talk to you too? Yep. And Raymond asked if we'd consider being evaluated as potential adoptive parents. Vincent stared into his coffee. I've been divorced twice. No kids from either marriage because I was apparently too focused on work. Now here's a kid who needs a father, and I'm terrified I'd screw it up. She asked me too, Raymond said. I've got the stable job, the house, the background that probably looks good on paper, but I barely survived my divorce 2 years ago. I don't know if I'm equipped to handle a child with trauma. What about me? Tommy asked. I'm assuming she didn't ask me because I'm the least stable, living in an apartment above my shop, working 80-hour weeks. Or me, Daniel added. Single teacher's salary supporting a kid isn't exactly ideal, even if the environment would be stable. Jake looked around the table at his brothers, each wrestling with the same question. Were they enough? Could any of them provide what Dakota needed? Here's what I know, Jake said slowly. 3 months ago, we made a choice to help a child in danger. We didn't overthink it. We didn't worry about whether we were qualified. We just acted. And it worked. Dakota's alive and healing because we chose to care. Maybe this is the same thing. Maybe we're overthinking it. Adoption is a bit more complex than a motorcycle ride to Flagstaff, Raymond pointed out. True, but the core question is the same. Are we willing to show up for her, consistently, long-term, whatever it takes? Jake looked at each of them. I think we already know the answer to that. We've been showing up every single Saturday for 3 months. We text Carol during the week to check on her. We coordinate our schedules around her needs. We're already acting like family. We just haven't made it official. So what are you saying? Vincent asked. I'm saying I'm going to call Benjamin Foster on Monday and start the evaluation process. Not because I'm certain I'm the right choice, but because Dakota deserves someone who's willing to try. And if I'm approved, if the state thinks a 45-year-old biker with PTSD can provide a stable home for a traumatized second grader, then I'm all in. Vincent nodded slowly. I'll call too. Might be that I'm a better choice than you, Jarhead. Competition for who gets to adopt her? Raymond raised an eyebrow. Not competition, Jake corrected. Options. The more of us who are evaluated, the better chance Dakota has of finding a permanent home with someone she already trusts. And whoever doesn't get chosen still stays in her life as uncles. That's the beauty of family. It doesn't have to be limited to one person. Tommy raised his coffee mug. To the Desert Riders Foster and Adoption Program, weirdest motorcycle club activity ever. To Dakota, Daniel corrected, raising his own mug. To the bravest 7-year-old who reminded 5 jaded adults what really matters. They clinked mugs, a solemn toast to futures uncertain but full of hope. Over the following weeks, Jake, Vincent, and Raymond each contacted Benjamin Foster and began the evaluation process. It was invasive and exhaustive. Home inspections, financial reviews, psychological assessments, references from employers and friends, training sessions on trauma-informed parenting. Each of them approached it with the same determination they'd shown that day on Highway 60. Dakota knew something was happening, but not the full extent. She just knew her favorite visitors were coming more often, sometimes during the week, sometimes bringing people who asked her questions about what she wanted in a family. One December afternoon, Jake sat with Dakota on the Morrisons' porch, while the others played with Buster in the yard. The air was crisp, and someone nearby had a fire going, the scent of wood smoke drifting on the breeze. "Dakota, can I ask you something?" "Sure." She was working on a friendship bracelet, her tongue poking out in concentration. "If you could have any kind of family you wanted, what would it look like?" Dakota thought about this seriously. "One that stays, that doesn't leave or hurt people or say mean things, one that likes dogs." She paused. "And maybe one that rides motorcycles." Jake laughed. "That's pretty specific. Mrs. Morrison says I might get adopted someday, that someone will choose me to be their kid forever." She looked up at him with those blue eyes that had haunted his dreams since July. "Do you think anyone will want me, even after what happened?" "Dakota," Jake said, his voice thick with emotion, "what happened wasn't your fault, and it doesn't make you less worthy of love. You're smart and brave and kind. Any family would be lucky to have you." "Even yours?" she asked quietly. The question hung between them. Jake realized this was the moment to be honest about what might happen. "Yeah," he said, "even mine. Actually, I've been talking to some people about whether I could maybe be your family. For real. Not just visits." Dakota's hands stilled on the bracelet. "Like, you'd be my dad? If you wanted that. If the state approves me. It's complicated and there's no guarantee, but I wanted you to know I'm trying." "Is Vincent trying too?" "Yeah, and Raymond, because we all think you're pretty special." Dakota was quiet for a long moment, processing. "Then can I tell you something? Anything. When I was hiding behind those tires, I was so scared I was going to die. I kept thinking about all the things I'd never get to do. Learn to ride a bike without training wheels, have a birthday party, get a dog, stuff like that. And then you found me and it was like someone finally picked me. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense. So even if you can't adopt me, even if it's Vincent or Raymond or someone else, you already saved me. You already gave me all those things I thought I'd never have. I got to learn to ride a bike. Mrs. Morrison taught me last month. And I have Buster, kind of. And you guys throw me birthday parties every week, practically." Jake pulled her into a hug. This remarkable child who'd survived so much and somehow remained hopeful. "You're going to have an amazing life, Dakota. I promise you that." "Because of you," she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "Because of you," he corrected. "You saved yourself by being brave enough to run, brave enough to trust strangers, brave enough to keep hoping. We just helped a little." In January, the evaluations concluded. Jake, Vincent, and Raymond were all approved as potential adoptive parents, each bringing different strengths to the table. The decision now rested with CPS, the Morrisons, Benjamin Foster, and ultimately Dakota herself. The meeting was held at the Children's Center on a cold Tuesday morning. Jake sat in the conference room with Vincent and Raymond, all three nervous in ways that combat and emergency calls had never made them. Carol and David Morrison were there, along with Benjamin, Dakota's therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, and the CPS caseworker, Angela Patterson, who'd been involved since that first day on the highway. "This is an unusual situation," Benjamin began. "We have 3 qualified candidates who all have existing relationships with the child. Normally, the state would make a placement decision based on the home study evaluations, but Dr. Chen suggested something different." The therapist leaned forward. "Dakota is at an age where she can participate in this decision. She's been through trauma that stole her agency, her sense of control. While we can't put the entire weight of choosing on her shoulders, I think she should have a voice. I've discussed all 3 candidates with her, their homes, their lives, what daily existence would look like with each of them. She has thoughts." Jake's heart pounded. The idea of Dakota having to choose between them felt cruel, but Dr. Chen was right. After everything, she deserved agency. "What did she say?" Vincent asked. "She said," Angela Patterson replied, consulting her notes, "that Jake feels like a dad, that Vincent feels like the best uncle in the world, and that Raymond feels like a really cool older brother. She said Jake's house is smaller, but he promised she could help decorate her room. She said Vincent's house has a bigger yard, but is farther from her school. She said Raymond's house is nice, but he works weird hours as a paramedic. So she picked Jake," Vincent said, and despite potential disappointment, he sounded relieved rather than resentful. "She picked Jake," Angela confirmed. "But she wants it in writing that Vincent and Raymond are still in her life, that the Desert Riders are still her family. She was very insistent on that point. Jake felt like the air had been knocked from his lungs. She'd chosen him. This incredible, brave, amazing child had chosen him to be her father. "I'm in," he managed. "Oh, whatever needs to happen, whatever adjustments I need to make, I'm all in." "There will be a transition period," Carol explained. "She'll do overnight visits with you, increasing gradually. We'll maintain therapy, ensure she's adjusting well. If all goes smoothly, full placement could happen by March, with finalization of adoption 6 months after that." "And we're good?" Jake looked at Vincent and Raymond. "You're okay with this?" "Brother, I'm thrilled," Vincent said, clasping Jake's shoulder. "You're a good man and you'll be a great dad. And she's right. I make an excellent uncle. Less pressure." Raymond nodded. "Same. I love that kid, but Jake, you've got something with her that's special. A connection that goes deeper. She needs you specifically. The rest of us will just spoil her on weekends and teach her inappropriate jokes." "Please don't," Dr. Chen said, though she was smiling. The meeting continued, outlining timelines and requirements, but Jake barely heard it. His mind was already racing ahead, child-proofing his house, converting his spare room into a bedroom fit for a second grader, figuring out school schedules and dinner routines, and how to braid hair because Dakota loved her braids. After the meeting, they brought Dakota in to tell her officially. She walked into the conference room holding Carol's hand, her expression carefully neutral in the way of children who'd learned not to hope too hard. "Hi, sweetheart," Jake said, getting down to her level. "They tell me you made a choice." Dakota nodded. "Are you mad that I picked you and not Vincent or Raymond?" "Mad? Dakota, I'm honored. I'm terrified and excited and so grateful I can barely think straight. But only if you're sure. This is a big decision." "I'm sure," Dakota said firmly. "But they still have to visit Jake, all of them. That's the rule." "That's absolutely the rule," Vincent agreed. "You think you're getting rid of us that easy?" Dakota smiled, then turned back to Jake. "So, should I call you Jake or something else?" "Whatever feels comfortable to you," Jake said. "We've got time to figure it out." "Okay, Jake for now. Maybe Dad later, when it feels real." "Sounds perfect." Dakota crossed the room and hugged him, and Jake felt something fundamental shift in his universe. He'd been a son, a brother, a soldier, a friend. Now he was becoming a father, not through biology or chance, but through choice, his and hers. The transition period went smoothly. Dakota spent weekends at Jake's house, then whole weeks. She decorated her room in purple and silver with horse posters and a shelf for her growing book collection. Jake learned to cook child-friendly meals, to help with homework, to check under the bed for monsters, even though they both knew monsters looked like abusive adults, not imaginary creatures. The Desert Riders adjusted their rides to family-friendly schedules. They taught Dakota basic motorcycle safety, promising her that when she was old enough, they'd teach her to ride. Tommy built her a custom jacket with a patch that read, "Junior Desert Rider." Vincent installed a tire swing in Jake's backyard. Raymond taught her basic first aid. Daniel tutored her in reading, watching her skills soar. In March, Dakota moved in permanently. In April, she called Jake Dad for the first time, casually asking him to pass the salt at dinner, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Jake had to excuse himself to the bathroom to compose himself. The adoption was finalized on a sunny Saturday in September, 1 year and 2 months after they'd found her hiding behind tires at an abandoned gas station. The courtroom was packed, the Desert Riders in their formal best, which still included leather vests, the Morrisons, Carolyn and Benjamin, Angela Patterson, Dr. Chen, teachers from Dakota's school, and neighbors who'd watched Jake transform into a devoted father. The judge, a woman named Kathleen Waters, smiled as she reviewed the paperwork. "In my 20 years on the bench, I've seen many adoptions, but this one is special. Mr. Harrison, you and your friends performed an extraordinary act of courage and compassion. Dakota, you showed remarkable bravery. Together, you've formed something beautiful, a family built not on biology, but on choice and love. It's my honor to finalize this adoption and declare that Dakota Reynolds is now legally Dakota Harrison." The courtroom erupted in applause. Dakota, wearing a new dress she'd picked out specially, beamed as Jake lifted her up and hugged her tight. "We did it," she whispered. "We're a real family now." "We were always a real family," Jake whispered back. "This just makes it official." Outside the courthouse, the Desert Riders formed a corridor with their motorcycles, engines revving in celebration. Dakota walked between them, high-fiving each rider, her laughter ringing out clear and joyful. They celebrated at the diner where they'd had that conversation about adoption nearly a year ago. Dakota held court, showing everyone her new legal documents, explaining to anyone who'd listen that she had 5 dads now, 1 official and 4 unofficial, but all equally important. As the afternoon faded into evening and the party wound down, Jake found himself on the diner's patio with Vincent, watching Dakota teach Tommy's girlfriend a complicated hand clap game. "You ever think about that day?" Vincent asked. "What would have happened if we'd taken a different highway, stopped at a different gas station, if we'd just kept riding?" "All the time," Jake admitted. "And I thank God we didn't. We were in the right place at the right time because we were supposed to find her." "You believe in fate now?" "I believe in second chances," Jake said. "I was drifting after the military, just existing day to day. Dakota gave me purpose again. She made me want to be better, do better. She saved me as much as I saved her." Vincent nodded, understanding. "She saved all of us. Gave the Desert Riders a reason to ride beyond just the freedom of the road. We're heroes now, whether we wanted to be or not." "Reluctant heroes," Jake corrected, smiling. "The best kind." Dakota ran over, grabbing Jake's hand. "Dad, Tommy says we can all go riding tomorrow if the weather's good. Can we, please?" "Dad." It still sent a thrill through him every time she said it. "Sure thing, sweetheart. But you've got homework first." She groaned dramatically, but her smile never faded. "Fine, but you have to help with the math. It's hard." "Deal." As they walked to Jake's truck, he'd traded his motorcycle for a family vehicle during the week, though he still rode on weekends. Jake looked back at the four men who'd become his brothers in the truest sense. They'd started as strangers, united by a love of motorcycles and open roads. They'd become heroes by accident, fathers by choice, and a family by design. The desert stretched beyond Flagstaff, still holding its secrets and dangers, but it also held beauty and possibility, and the memory of 5 riders who'd stopped at an abandoned gas station and chose to care about a child they'd never met. Dakota buckled herself into her booster seat, still chattering about tomorrow's ride. Jake started the engine, and as they pulled away from the diner, he caught sight of them all in the rearview mirror. Vincent, Tommy, Raymond, and Daniel standing beside their motorcycles, watching him drive away with his daughter. His daughter. The words still felt new and wonderful. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere between that abandoned gas station and this moment, Jake had found redemption, purpose, and family. He'd learned that heroism wasn't about grand gestures or medals. It was about showing up, caring consistently, and choosing love over indifference. "Hey, Dad," Dakota said from the back seat. "Yeah, sweetheart. Thank you for finding me, for keeping me." Jake's throat tightened. "Thank you for letting me, for being brave enough to trust strangers on motorcycles." "You weren't strangers," Dakota said. "You were family. I just didn't know it yet." And there, in that simple statement from a wise beyond her years child, was the truth of everything. Family wasn't just about blood or legal documents. It was about the people who showed up when you needed them most, who stayed when things got hard, who chose you every single day. The Desert Riders had found a child in danger on a scorching July afternoon. What they discovered was so much more: purpose, redemption, and the transformative power of choosing to care. They'd started as 5 men on motorcycles. They'd become heroes, advocates, and ultimately a family. And Dakota Reynolds, now Dakota Harrison, had gone from a terrified child hiding behind tires to a thriving, loved, joyful girl with 5 fierce protectors and an entire community dedicated to her well-being. Sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with a simple decision to stop, to look, to care. Sometimes heroism is just refusing to ride past someone in need. And sometimes, in saving someone else, you discover you've saved yourself. The open road stretched ahead of them, full of possibilities and promise. Behind them was a year of challenges and triumphs, fear and hope, bureaucracy and love. Ahead was a lifetime of school pickups and birthday parties, motorcycle rides and bedtime stories, homework help and heart-to-heart talks. Jake smiled as Dakota started singing along to the radio, slightly off-key, but full of joy. This was his life now, unexpected, complicated, sometimes terrifying, and absolutely perfect. The Desert Riders had discovered a child in danger. What they did to protect her was indeed heroic. But the real miracle wasn't the rescue itself. It was everything that came after. It was 5 flawed men becoming the family one brave girl needed. It was choosing each other again and again through every challenge and triumph. As they drove home through the desert twilight, past the very highway where their story began, Jake Harrison, former soldier, motorcycle enthusiast, and now father, understood finally what he'd been searching for since leaving the military. He'd been looking for a mission worth fighting for. He'd found it in the trust of a 7-year-old girl who'd shown him that the greatest battles aren't fought with weapons, but with patience, love, and the stubborn refusal to give up on someone who needs you. The Desert Riders had discovered a child in danger. They'd protected her with courage, advocated for her with determination, and loved her with their whole hearts. And in doing so, they'd all found their way home.